Hi everyone. Another day, another retro portable console to review, and this one takes a bit of inspiration from Sony's upcoming PlayStation Portal. This portable console is called Project X and costs around $30 to $35. Inside the box, in addition to the console itself, Project X comes with a USB-C charging cable, a mini HDMI to HDMI cable, and a small instruction manual. In terms of specifications, Project X has a quad-core ATM 7051 CPU. It covers everything from arcade games to PlayStation 1. However, Project X struggles to run anything remotely demanding from the PlayStation catalog and struggles with some GBA and Super Nintendo games. Project X has 2 GB of RAM, a 4.3-inch IPS screen with a resolution of 800 by 480 pixels. It has a 2,500 mAh battery that lasts around 4 hours, weighs around 380 grams, and comes with an updated version of the same basic firmware we've seen many times before. Right out of the box, there's no ignoring how bright Project X is. The console is super shiny from virtually any direction and becomes a fingerprint magnet very quickly. Although the plastic is so shiny that fingerprints are at least very easy to wipe off. On the top, we have the power button, volume control, USB-C charging port and micro HDMI port, as well as the micro SD slot. On the front, we have a very PlayStation-inspired control layout, including clickable joysticks and small LEDs next to the screen. On the back, we already have a huge number of fingerprints along with the stereo speaker grills, which are a challenge when you're holding the console. As you can probably hear, there's also a lot of noise associated with these cheaper portable consoles. Moving on to the controls, Project X is really comfortable in the hands, or would be if it weren't so slippery due to the shiny plastic. The shoulder buttons are quite responsive with a good range of pressure in almost all areas, and the triggers aren't analog, but at least they're easy to press without sharp plastic. The face buttons are really good. They're not as shiny as the rest of the shell, and they have a good pressure and are also quite responsive. The size is good too, and although they still look like a cheap console, I've seen worse. Speaking of worse things, the D-pad is absolutely terrible. They've replicated the PlayStation's drop style, but it doesn't have any of the accuracy of what it's trying to imitate. The shiny inputs mixed with a glossy shell mean that my thumb slips all over the base when I try to use it, and there simply isn't enough central space to orient yourself. The joysticks are just about okay, but are almost completely flat in comparison with a very limited travel. It seems a challenge to use it for anything that requires some form of precision. Moving on to the firmware, we've seen the basis of this many times on various cheap handheld consoles in the channel, although this seems to be the latest version we've seen so far. In terms of the home screen, it displays some classic arcade games on the middle and right screens, with the emulators organized on the left screen. Project X has 8 GB of internal memory, which seems to be full of ROMs, although there are hundreds of repeats, which does make navigation a little tiresome. As well as games, there are apps for video, music, photos, ebooks, a calculator, a stopwatch, theme switching, settings, and a file browser included. It's all very basic, but it's functional, only made worse by all the wrong repetitions. It's worth noting that both the screen and audio quality are rather poor, so you won't have any fun watching videos on the console. In-game, the firmware allows you to save and load states, change the input settings in your chosen emulator, as well as setting the screen aspect ratio to full screen or fit to screen, which is always great to see. Anyway, I'll cut some gameplay footage now and summarize, coming back at the end. So, Project X doesn't quite hit the mark, which is a shame, because I think with a bit more effort, it could have the potential to be a pretty good portable console. As it stands, though, the ruined D-pad, overly restrictive joysticks, and the shiniest hole we've ever seen prevent it from being a recommendation for me. But I'd love to hear your opinions on it. That's it for me, thanks for watching.